Hi everybody, I'm glad to be back at Frontrends, albeit in a very uncommon slot for me. You know, I used to give the very last talk in the very last day. Yeah, Frontrends, save the last talk for me. Thanks. I used to give the last talk, as I called it last year, the unlightning talk, because after that all the lights go down. And I thought I might be different each year, so this year I switched to a lightning talk. And 3 years ago I gave a talk about multilingual websites. So this year, my lightning talk will be about multilingual web pages. When you have many languages nested into each other. So the title is Language in язык, in Sprach, in Sprache. Oh, wait a minute. Sprache and Sprach, that sounds too familiar. Because you know that German is kind of like Yiddish written in Latin letters, right? So let's change it for something else. Maybe, obviously, Polish. Язык. Oh, wait a minute. Языk, it sounds too familiar, right? So Polish is kind of like Russian written in Latin letters. So no Polish here. Let's take something else. Maybe Spanish. Lengua. Oh, wait a minute. Language. The British decided centuries ago to throw away all the Germanic vocabulary and go for Romance. So that doesn't fit here as well. So what language on earth might fit here? Oh, doesn't have to be a language from Earth. Wait a minute. I had a title in Klingon language last year, and I want to be different, so it doesn't work either. What else can we do? Arabic. I cannot read it. Sarah Swaidan was supposed to be here. Where is she when she's needed? So sorry, no Arabic, maybe Japanese. Can't read it either. So let's go for Chinese? Yeah, maybe I'm different. Let's go for Chinese, and I'll be the first speaker ever who's not able to tell the title of his own talk. Oh, by the way, did you see those both in Japanese and Chinese? You know, I like to compare languages, right? You might remember that from last year, though. Chinese and Japanese, they use the same characters, actually, and these are really the same Unicode code points, just in different order. And when the language is declared in the markup, which you should do, then the browser uses different fonts for rendering. So as I told you last year, always declare the language and also changes of the language inside the document, because a screen reader might read without the lang PL, would read Grojeka instead of Grujecka. Okay, so last year I took you 300 years into the future. This year I'm going to take you 53 years into the past, when Martin Luther King told the 250,000 participants of the March on Washington, "I have a dream." How does that look in markup? Well, we have the language declared, and we have a Q element around the quote. And the browser renders the quotation marks based on this, which might look like this in some browsers. Sorry, folks, these are not quotation marks. These are string terminators. Quotation marks look like this, right? 666 at the beginning, 99 at the end. So how do we do that in CSS? Well, with just one line. And we can set up the quotes, and even quotes for nested quotations. so secondary level quotes. Okay, let's translate this into Polish. Oops. And would look like this, which is wrong, because the Polish quotation marks should look like this, with a double nine, the lower double nine at the beginning. So how do this? We can add a rule for Polish language where we set the Polish quotes. And for German, it would look like this, which is wrong, because in German we don't use the double nine at the end, but the double six. And we have another rule in a style sheet, which does just that. Okay, let's say this first one is in English, and we change the order alphabetically, and this is basically what modern browsers do. Okay. Let's go. Okay, when we don't want to translate the quote because it's famous enough to be understood, right? Do I have it here? Well, okay, we can say it in the markup. Don't translate this quote. So an automated translation service would not do this, and a human translator might recognize this as a call, leave it as it is. And in Polish, it looks like this then. Okay? And we have to declare the language here because this is in English, the quotation. And it looks like this, but it shouldn't. Because the quotation marks around the quote should not depend on the quote, but on the context. So you should have Polish quotation marks here. How can we do, yep. You might think, okay, let's put the quote in a span. No, that's a bad idea, right? We don't want to have additional markup just for styling. No, we go with the markup we already have and do it with CSS. So instead of saying that the quotes depend on the language of the quote, we just say that the quotes depend on the language of the context here, right? And then it works for German as well. We have an English quote, but in German, quotation marks. And for English, okay. Okay, let's nest this as a quote into another context. Okay? Well, how does it look like? It looks pretty good to me. So we have the outer context is English, so we have the double quotation marks, the English ones, and then we have Polish context, and the inner quotation marks are Polish. Nice. And the markup just looks like this. We have the language declared on the quotes, and it works. Let's change for German, and it's look like this. You see the problem? It shouldn't look like this, because well, we have the English quotation marks on the outside, but we don't have we have the Germans there. Here's German, right. German looks like this, but it shouldn't, because we still have the Polish quotation marks here and not the German ones. Why? No, because the rule for Polish comes after the rule for Germans. So that we got it right for Polish was accidentally, but we don't want to have it right by chance, right? So what have we to do? We want to achieve this result, okay? So we don't have to make it dependent on the context of something, on some context, but on the context of the parent element. So we use a parent combinator here. Yeah, and that's basically it, what I wanted to tell. But there was a discussion in the last month on the W3C internationalization mailing list, where people said, well, we don't want to have these quotation marks. These are irritating to the reader. We rather want to have both quotation marks, the outer ones and the inner ones, depending on the outer context, right? So it should look like this. So the outer context is English, and we should have English quotation marks also for the inner quote. How can we do this? Well, with just another rule here. Would this work? So this inner quote inherits the quotation marks from the outer quote. Well, it wouldn't work this way because the selector has too low specificity. Remember, we had this, and these are attribute selectors are more specific than type selectors, so we might add an important here, which is not a bad thing. You might do this in this case. You know, as Harry Robert used to say, never use important in anger, but we are not in anger here, right? So, remember, always declare the language for the whole page on the HTML element, changes of the language inside the document. We might use a translate attribute for content that you don't want to have translated. Whenever you see this, what you actually want to have is this. Use important when it's important. And you remember, you've never seen any class here. Isn't this in the markup? Isn't it amazing? You can style without classes. Get this. So, let freedom ring. Thank you.